I wanted to first thank Mandy Chapman and Joe Glossford and all of the others who have put this event together and have seen the value in the work that I do and my passion project, the Adopt a Single Mom Project, because there are plenty of other things that could have been in this slot today for all of the needs and the meaningful projects and work that go on in the community. Today I'm going to share with you why we're here, which is to learn and develop a greater understanding of those in our community living in the gap, the real struggles, the reality of the vulnerability and the needs of those living in the gap, particularly single moms here in northeastern Pennsylvania, because that does happen to be the organization that I founded, so I have heavy focus on that. But nonetheless, there are many people that are living in the gap in this community who are not single moms. They're also single dads. And there's also single grandmothers and single grandfathers and aunts and uncles and people of all different, ways that are single parents or are living in the gap, even as single individuals. So there's so many of my peers that are here, and I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. So I hope that I can bring something fresh and new that will help you have a better understanding of those who are living in the gap and the ways that we need to support them and the real struggles that they're having. I'm going to share some actual financial scenarios and why those who are living in the gap are not getting resources that those who are, say, at the poverty level are getting. And then I never show up without solutions. I have 2 solutions that are going to solve all of our problems that we have become aware of today, if it were only that easy. Maybe you're wondering, what in the heck is the gap? So the gap are those who, across multiple family compositions, suggest that there are many families who do not earn a living wage necessary for a dignified quality of life and who do not have access or may not have access to assistance programs. There's a gap between income eligibility and the living wage threshold. I'm going to share a lot of numbers with you today. If you're not a numbers person, your head might feel like it wants to pop by the end of today. So I'll try and make it as exciting as possible. But most working families above the federal poverty level, especially one-income households such as single parents, do not qualify for federal assistance programs such as food stamps or housing subsidies or things like LIHEAP and other energy assistance programs or free or reduced lunch or WIC, and so on and so forth. I'm going to hire this girl. Forget it, Joe. So the most prevalent gap for single moms particularly are really 3 things. There's an inadequate support system, a gap of emotional support for them, often feeling isolated, lonely, and unsupported, and often she's suffering in silence, in loneliness and depression, because she doesn't have the connection and the social outlets that those who have more intact families have. So, I don't know about you guys, but after this morning, I'm pretty fired up because I see what our single moms have gone through. As a single mom living in the gap myself, I see the struggle, and being a CASA advocate, I see what our families also go through, and just a snippet of it. Going through that process this morning just makes it so much more real, doesn't it? We have lots of issues and challenges in our community, and I don't really think it's that hard for us to fix them, but I do believe that collectively it does take all of us to be part of that, as was said this morning. And for those who are living in the gap, the 3 primary challenges for them are financial, their trauma experiences, negative adverse experiences throughout their lifetime, and the lack of social and emotional support. And if we had to have one driver that controls so many of those things, it would be trauma. If we could just get to the root of things. I know that this was about poverty, but truthfully, if we really focused on the trauma, we would have less poverty, because it drives so many of our behaviors and our mindset and the decisions that we make and the people we surround ourselves with and the quality of life that we have. So the financial difficulties for those living in the gap really affect those parents those households that have only 1 and 2 children, because they make a certain amount of money, and when you look at the financial criteria for getting services, they're already outside of those limits. And then the exposure to trauma, which starts for most of us in early childhood. Whether it was a little trauma or a big trauma, we've all been exposed to trauma that has affected who we are as adults. And what we're seeing is now through the research, through neuroscience and others, and epigenetics, we're seeing now the research and the result of being exposed to trauma, where if you grew up like I did, it was like time heals all wounds. This thing will pass. We just let it go, right? And it's just not true. We're seeing the effects of it, and I'm going to share some of that with you. So, and then the lack of social and emotional support, and how it affects our emotional and our mental well-being, and the choices that we make, and the relationships that we're in, and the lack of self-care, which is a big thing that we see with our single moms. And I say, listen, everything I'm going to say, really, you don't have to be a single mom or a single dad or a single parent. I know that this stuff affects every one of us. So, but those of us who are parents get impacted a lot more. Jessica has had it really hard. At 27, you can see parenting is not for the faint of heart, and that doing it alone will aid you. So fortunately, it didn't do too bad for me. So it was only because I had a really good kid. So, so doing it alone, you can ask any parent, and they will tell you that raising children has many challenges. As a single parent, though, it brings the complexity to a whole other level. So I'm hitting the surface and some basic things about single parenting today and the struggles and the challenges. Not even getting into the complex issues that we talked about this morning, like maybe your children being removed from the home, or being homeless, or so many other things, traumatic things that could happen. So we have financial struggles, a myriad of things to navigate as a single parent, planning and decision making and legal and child support issues and starting and ending relationships, and they all take an emotional toll on a single parent. And I was the single parent, so I want to share a little bit about my story. That's me a few years ago with my 2 boys. The blonde is the photographer in the back of the room. That's Kanan, who's now 24. And my son Lucas, who was 2 in that picture. Isn't he the cutest thing ever? And he was such a good baby. So Lucas died when he was 3. He was born with a rare genetic disorder, trisomy 18. He developed pulmonary hypertension after having an amazing surgery of closing this big hole in his heart, and then he got problems with his lungs. So yeah, we had quite a ride with Lucas for 3 years. He spent 50% of his life in the hospital. Every couple of weeks, every couple of months, it was something, because he had one respiratory infection after another. And through trauma of being intubated and extubated, he stopped eating by mouth, and then he was fed by a feeding tube. That's that little yellow thing you see sticking out of his nose. So my boys were 12 years apart. I was divorced when Kanan was 2, and then somehow got pregnant with Lucas. And I mean, I know how that happened, but it was a surprise. But neither one of their fathers were involved. They were 100% absentee fathers. And I will be honest, when I hear some of my friends' stories, or hear some of the stories of those single moms that I support, I'm really glad they weren't in the picture. Because I didn't really have to share any of the decision making with anyone. I didn't have to fight with anyone over custody. I didn't have a fear of anyone coming and taking my children. But that didn't make it any less difficult, because there was also no one there to edify you, no one there to give you a break, no one there to have a couple of weekends off a year, even if that's all it was. And they certainly didn't pay adequate child support. In fact, Lucas's father paid about $30 a month, and he fell in arrears, if you can imagine. And about a year after Lucas passed away, I was still getting, every once in a while, those stupid child support payments. It made me angry. So the struggle of a single mom living in the gap, we all have a different story. And it's a struggle for all of us, or single fathers, not to exclude them. But I realized that some of the decisions that I made as an adult and the poor relationships that I got in, or the bad relationships that I chose or allowed for my life, were also driven by the complex childhood that I had and my own traumas and my own things that I had never dealt with. Now, today, I know better. And I've dealt with a lot of my childhood issues and understanding where they come from. And it's part of what drove me to be an empowerment coach and an organizational well-being consultant, to help others to see those things and to heal and to be more empowered as individuals. So having grown up in a dysfunctional home, it was something that I was insistent was not going to happen to my children. But isn't it crazy how it happens anyway? So Kane could probably come up here and tell you how dysfunctional it was. I'm not going to admit it. So anyway, I thought that I would go back to school as an adult and get an education, because somehow that would give me a lot of credibility and a better job. But what I want you to know is that did not happen. Neither one of those two things. I ended up with $60,000 in debt, and I could have got a $36,000 a year job, and I just realized that that was not a good path to be on as a single parent. So through one of my passions of wanting to give back to the community, I wanted to find a way through things that were through my life that I could identify ways to support others. And being a single mom in the gap was how the Adopt a Single Mom project came about. And I didn't expect it to be such a big thing. I just wanted to help some single moms, not the kids, the moms who never get any recognition, get no support. The ones who are always the givers, the supporters of the community. They're the ones involved in their kids' school and giving everything for their kids. They might not buy new underwear for 5 years to make sure their kids have the latest and greatest. So that's really a real story. I mean, just keeping it real. So there's all kinds of, so not to belabor my story, because I don't want this to be about me by any means. There's all kinds of, you can go next one. So there's all kinds of single parents. I feel like, we just tapped on it a little bit this morning, talking about the stigma of poverty. Do you know single parents, particularly single moms, have a stigma too? Apparently, they all just pop out babies and they're all on welfare. That's what people really think. There's a big segment of our community that just think that about us. But yet, most of us are working right next to those boneheads at work, and they don't even know that we're single parents, because we show up every day and we just make shit happen. It's amazing. And it amazes me, the people that support my organization, and then they're like, find out that their coworker, they're giving me money to support other single moms, and they've got somebody sitting at the desk next to them who's a single mom, and I'm thinking, why don't you just give it to her, So, but there's all kinds of single parents. We're not all, sitting around home eating bonbons on the welfare system. Some of us have been abandoned. As in my case, I was married for 2 years. I didn't like it. He was not the father of either one of my children, thank God, because he was easy then to get rid of. But anyway, then some of us are divorced like I was, and then unwed mothers, and both of my kids I had out of wedlock. I know that makes me something other people would call me, but it happens. And then there's widows. We have single moms that are part of the Adopt a Single Mom project whose husbands have died either from an accident or from an illness. And we often don't think about those moms except at the moment of that tragedy. And then we go on about our lives, and she struggles the rest of hers. So I wanted to point that out, just to be mindful that people become single parents for many different reasons. And there's a huge number of single parents in this country. I'm going to narrow this down to where it only matters to our community in a minute. But just to look at the big picture of things, there are almost 10 million single mothers, this is just the mothers, in this country, raising children under the age of 18. And we have this belief system. I don't know where this comes from. And I think over the next couple decades, we'll adjust this. But somehow we think that when our kids turn 18, somehow there's like this magic thing that happens. Like somehow we don't support them anymore and that we should be good. That didn't happen for me. Did it happen for any of you?
Not yet.
No.
Still late.
He's 24 and just moved back home. Yeah.
I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but I've been pushing my kids. He's getting a suitcase when he graduates.
Well, let us know how that works. Good luck with that. Yeah. That's what he did, but he came back.
I know, that's what I feel.
All right. And I'm very happy about that. All right. So in Luzerne County, we have 9,700 single mom families. Single moms with kids under the age of 18. That's not counting pathetic moms like me who have 24-year-olds still living with them and you're paying their bills. It's okay though. I'm okay with that. All right, and then in Lackawanna County, we have 4,600 single mom families living in the gap. These are not just single mom families. These are working single moms in the gap, above the poverty level, not getting services and resources that those in a lower income get. And dads, in Luzerne County, we have 3,100. You can see the number is significantly less. There are only about 20, I say only, there are about 20% of the single family households are single dads. And fun fact, some of them, it's more common for them, let me watch my words, it's more common that they cohabit. So, meaning they, even though they're single dads, they still have a support system that lives in the home with them versus single moms. And single moms are more likely to be in poverty than single dads are. Single dads in Lackawanna County are 1,800. That's a total of almost 20,000 single parent households just in our two counties. And the only reason I'm telling you these two counties, it's the only two that we have research on. So it's not Susquehanna County, it's not counting Wyoming County, the other Carbon County, other northeastern Pennsylvania, Monroe, other counties that many of your agencies serve. So what are the challenges that are facing these single parent households? They are many. This is not a complete list. I don't want to bore you. So, but a limited earning capacity is one of the biggest ones. And part of that, there's two reasons that I hear most commonly. One is because it's hard for parents to get daycare so they can work even multiple jobs. I have so many single moms tell me, I'd be willing to work 2 or 3 jobs, but I can't get a babysitter, or I can't afford the daycare, or I don't want my kids to be in daycare or with a babysitter 70 hours a week, in which they'd be willing to work to be able to pay their bills and have something beyond the basics. And the second piece of that is there's a mom that volunteers with us right now. She has limited earning capacity because in her divorce agreement, she's not allowed to move outside of the area. So she's been offered jobs outside of the area, but is not allowed to take them because the child's father has it in the court agreement that she's not allowed to do that. He's allowed to go, but she is not. And then unaffordable daycare, which we said, limited access to transportation, which was addressed this morning, financial difficulties, things around budgeting, not having enough money, stealing from Peter to pay Paul, poor decisions, oh my God. Listen, I was this mother too. Making poor financial decisions so that your kids can have. We will steal from Peter to pay Paul, skip bills, do anything to make sure our kids have what they want or need most of the time. And then legal issues. And then being the sole provider and sole decision maker, it gets tiring, I will tell you. Never getting a break. It's feeling lonely, stressed, and never getting a break and legal issues are the top 4 things that single moms tell us are the things that they would like to fix. If I just had these 4 things fixed. Did you hear money was not even in there? It's just not in there. It's all of this stuff that weighs so heavy on them emotionally. And never being able to get a break to have some girl time. And then being chronically overwhelmed and stressed, as I said, custody battles, no support system, lack of confidence and low self-esteem, unresolved childhood trauma, and current trauma. So there was this study that was done by the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development as a partnership with the University of Scranton. And the study was, I'm just going to quote you some of the things from it. It got me pretty fired up. So, and I read this a year ago. Look, I didn't even know there was a thing called the gap. I just called it the gap because I always had a gap. So when I founded the Adopt a Single Mom Project and started saying, hey, I want to help these moms that are in the gap, and then I found this research that called it the gap, I'm like, wow, I'm so smart. Anyway, thank you for laughing. So in the study, I'm just going to read this, found that there are all of these assistance programs, and there's a gap between, as I said earlier, between eligibility and a living wage. And I tell you, when I read that, I went, oh wow, somebody finally gets it. Until I read the whole damn study. And then I'm like, not sure they get it. So the study said that to have a, what do they call it? A living wage, that we need to have these basic expenses covered. And they are food, Erica, you can go to the next one. Food, housing, child care, health care, basic technology, which would be a smartphone and Wi-Fi in your home, which is awesome because there are lots of people that can't afford that stuff, right? Especially Wi-Fi in their home. And the ability to have your taxes taken out of your paycheck. And not like we have a choice about that, right? And then transportation, and then a nominal amount for household personal care, reading, which I, quite frankly, I just can't understand with the internet, and clothing, but if they're going to give us money for it, we'll take it. Okay, so here's what happened. So I read that and I went, okay, somehow this is supposed to be a good quality of life with all of these basic needs covered. And I'll tell you, you can be tricked into thinking this is good. But let me tell you, when you rethink what we just went through this morning, I woke up, I saw this on one of my friends, a very successful business owner, another female coach friend of mine. She had this posted on her page. I woke up, I have clothes to wear, I have running water, I have food to eat, life is good, I'm thankful. There's two things that I have one problem with. One, part of this is, if that's all you got going on, you're not really that thankful. Because if you woke up this morning and you have clothes to wear, but you just got laid off from your job and you don't have a job to go to, you're feeling pretty crummy today. If you woke up this morning and you have running water, but your electricity has been turned off, it's hard to be real thankful and say life is good. If you woke up this morning and you have food to eat, but you don't have any transportation to get to grocery store to replace that, maybe because you lost your job, you're not saying life is good. Here's the problem I have with this in part, is sometimes it makes us feel shameful when we're in those situations and we're like, huh, I guess because I have running water and I woke up today, thank you Lord, I should just be thankful, life is good, when life is really pretty crappy. And I think lots of times it makes us feel shameful. Look, I'm the biggest advocate for gratitude, compassion, appreciation. It's what gets me through every day and not being a complete jerk all day. But seriously, if that's the extent of what your life is about in any given day, it's not good, it's stressful. We learned that this morning, right? So just to keep things in perspective. Show me money. Okay, so that living wage study that I shared with you, focusing on the yellow at the top, is about single parent households. So there's, second column in is one adult, one child. Second column, one adult, two children. And then the last column is one adult, three children. So this is the information that we're mostly going to work with through the rest of this. So in this living wage study, they determined that it takes for one adult, one child household, so one single parent household in Luzerne and Lackawanna County, that if you have $42,588 coming in, that you are living it up. Really though, just covering those basic expenses. I want you to know, as a single mom of one child and then two children, that's dead broke. So I wish I had done my own profile to show you how broke that is when I do my budget. There's always red if that's what I had to work with one adult, one child. Now, when we look at, so we're going to come back to that. Don't let me get ahead of myself. So the living wage study indicates, what families need to live a modest but dignified life where their basic needs are met. So part of the challenge that I have with this is that I think we need to stop living with this poverty mentality that we keep saying that we need to fix. But yet, if we keep saying all we want to do is get just enough, just cover the basics, let's make sure they earn enough just to get by, we're just perpetuating the problem. We need economic security, and that doesn't happen with covering the basics. That is not dignified living. However, if you think about your own budget and your own lifestyle, I overtalk, so I want to make sure I keep going here. So this is what we just talked about in the living wage study. That is to cover our basics with the income that I just showed you. And then we have real life, like legal fees and car maintenance and recreation and hobbies and healthcare co-pays and home maintenance and things like, if you really want to have your act together, like estate planning, life insurance, you're actually paying off your college debt instead of, keep putting that off. And if we go on to personal care items, right? I don't know, do any of you celebrate Christmas, birthdays, any of that kind of stuff? Do you need money to do that?
Yeah, it's in our budget. You have to budget it.
You budget it because you have money to budget.
That's what I'm saying. You have to have. You have to have it in your budget.
Exactly, right? How about a vacation? School field trips. It's amazing how expensive those things are now. Like, I have no idea, right? But the single moms, like, that have kids in, like, grade school and stuff, they're like $80 for the school field trip. I'm like, wow, that's a part-time job to be able to chance 5 kids. Could you imagine? So, I'm moving on. And so the point is, more importantly, right, is that we all have real life, these are things that we all have as expenses. So how do we expect people to call this dignified living? I bet, as much as I put thought into this and thought about myself and expenses that others have that I don't have, like school field trips, thank God, and summer camp, which was just amazing for my son. He went to the most amazing summer camp, and if you have children, you should make sure you send them to Camp Orchard Hill too. I have to plug that for a moment for Mr. Pink. So, so we need to move from this basic just get by mindset to thriving. And I know it's not just a mindset, it requires resources, right? So, thank you, Donna. So, shifting from that scarcity mindset and covering basic needs is just enough for these underserved, under-recognized populations to possibilities, potential for thriving. It just sounds better, doesn't it? And believe me, when these parts of our community know that that's our goal and that we want to support them and we're demonstrating that, they feel it too. When they know our goal is, let's get you covered on the basics and good luck, we're just perpetuating the problem. So it's about not surviving, but thriving. So here's part of the challenge, is our minimum wage dilemma. Right now it's $7.25, we all know that. That's $15,000 a year before taxes. So let's say we get that $15 an hour raise, $15 minimum wage increase. Is it really making a big impact? I know it sounds big, but it's so little and insignificant. I'm going to tell you why. So at $31,000 a year, that's $15 an hour. Our average single mom household right now makes $35,000 compared to couples household at $85,000. Single dads make a little bit more at $40,000. We're just not getting there. But then we have other sources of income sometimes, right? So we have child support, which the average child support payment nationally is $430. That's another $5,100 a year. So when we add that to the minimum wage or the $15 an hour job or maybe our potential minimum wage, we're still topping at $36,000. Now, if you remember what we talked about on, I should flip that slide over, for the dignified living wage, was it $42,000? I think it was for a single one-child home. But here's the thing. So even if a parent does get, so the child support is $430, yet only 1/3 of single moms receive child support. Only 1 in 4 single parents also live with their parents. I see that a lot with the single moms that participate in our Adopt a Single Mom group. Why do they do that? Because they're so in love with their parents, they just couldn't leave? No. They can't afford not to. Why do you think my 24-year-old is living with me? He doesn't want to. And that's okay. It's okay. He shouldn't want to. If he wanted to, I did something fundamentally wrong, I'm just going to say. Here's the rub. This was my life as a single parent in the Gap. So I know you came here just to see this one slide. So the community assistance programs that in the community at large, we think, why is she struggling? Why don't they just go down to the county assistance office and get some help? What is the CEO there for? Go. Okay, let me tell you, it's not what you think. So in the living wage study, this is the income that was on that slide from the study of how much money they think it takes to cover the basics. This is 200, the second column is 200% above federal poverty level. Most of the single moms that participate in the Adopt a Single Mom project that we're meeting or that are attracted to the work that we're doing are between 150 and 250% above federal poverty level. What's in red is the programs that those income levels, those households do not qualify for. So a single parent with one child, even making only 200% above federal poverty level at $33,000, does not get free reduced lunch, does not qualify for WIC, and does not qualify for heat assistance. But she does qualify for CHIP, which was awesome. I was able to have that for Canaan, and believe me, it was fantastic. And the two children, single parent household, again, can you see that the only thing they qualify is CHIP based on their income? There aren't that many assistance programs. And if you look at how close they are to the edge, guess what? When they get a raise or they go back to court to get a little more child support, they're out. So when parents go, no, don't give me that raise. I'm not going back for more child support, even though he should pay it, she should pay it, my kids deserve it. There's a reason they don't. You've got to be a mathematician to work this stuff, to make sure that you're not working yourself out of benefits, because an extra $10 a week is not going to do the benefit of not having CHIP for your children. It's madness. Now, the truth is, if we could get all of the programs to meet the criteria that CHIP does, that would be a big help for these families in the Gap. So if anyone has any connections and can influence that, at the end we're going to be gathering resources. And the reason that we didn't even have food stamps on there, in case you're wondering, where's the food stamp thing? Where's the SNAP program? Believe me, if they don't qualify for any of that stuff, food stamps is not even a consideration. And 55% of single moms do not get food stamp benefits for the obvious reasons that we just shared. So again, as I said, economic security needs to be our intention if we're going to build sustainable families and communities. All right, so on to number 2, trauma. I'm only going to touch on this. It could literally be, every one of these 3 points could be a hour-long presentation within itself. How many of you have heard of the ACEs study? How many? Oh my God, this is so awesome. How many of you have done your own ACE score? Too scared, right? I understand. It can be scary, but be strong, be strong. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the ACEs study, ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experience, of which we all had. It was a very large study, a partnership between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente of 17,000 people, and they wanted to see long-term what the implications were of adverse childhood experiences. This is really important for those of us, which I guess is probably the whole room, who are working in the helping fields. Because every person, including your coworker, that you interact with has something going on with them that has been affected by some kind of trauma. So the ACE study looked at 10 key areas, and you get a 1 for each one of these. So the parents separated or divorced. You know, I posted this in a Facebook group the other day because I wanted to do some research because I was kind of onto this thing that I'll share with you in a minute. And I was like, oh my God, my ACE score just went up. I better check on that. But one of the moms said to me, what if your parents were divorced multiple times? Is that like you count that 2, 3 times? And I thought, oh God, I'm doomed. I mean, seriously, my mother was married and divorced 3 times before I was out of high school. But I'm only counting it as 1. I have enough ACEs that I don't need to add any extras. Physical, sexual, emotional abuse. Think about yourself here for a minute. Count up your ACEs, because I'm going to share some of the consequences of them. Physical and emotional neglect, being exposed to domestic violence as a child, mental illness in your family, someone in your family, substance abuse or dependence, and a family member being incarcerated. Having just 6 of those is a life reduction by 20 years. Now, I'm not really sure what my lifespan was to start with, but we'll just say it was 80. I don't really think I'm going to die at 60 because that means I only have a few more years. But I had 7 ACEs. 7. That doesn't scare me, by the way. But if you had only 4 ACEs, it increases your risk for cancer, COPD, diabetes, stroke, suicide, depression. Do we have a depression issue in this country right now? Do we look at trauma really as the root of it? We don't, right? We're just like, yeah, that bad thing that happened to you, I know it's sad, here's some medication. Go meditate. Whatever, right? We need to really deal with the root of the issues. Twice as many women suffer from depression than men. If you had only 2 ACEs, if you're breathing in this room, that's probably pretty hard to say that you didn't have 2 ACEs. Here's the risk. 70 to 80% increased risk of having an autoimmune disorder. I didn't even include all of the autoimmune disorders. But isn't that shocking? Now, in the Facebook groups, I told you I was doing a poll. I'm onto this thing, and I want to do some research. Again, resources. Anybody want to do the research with me? But I believe that single moms, with the amount of stress that they have on them, they are much more susceptible to developing autoimmune disorders. Now, we know how the body works and because of stress, but when I polled these women in the groups and shared the ACEs and said my idea, not every stinking one of them, every one of those beautiful ladies said, here was my triggering event. It was this trauma. It was after I found out my husband was cheating on me and left. I mean, it was across the spectrum, different things, but it was the triggering thing that right after that they got diagnosed. Isn't that crazy? So the impact of trauma has many factors. What they didn't do in the ACEs study, though, was look at other things that cause trauma, like school bullying. Was anybody bullied in school? Was it traumatic? Was I the only one? Or you don't have to raise your hand, sorry. being a victim of a hate crime or hate abuse or racism, experiencing serious physical trauma. How about a car accident or witnessing a car accident of someone in your family? I remember my oldest sister, my mom's best friend, she had 3 boys, we were 3 girls, and we lived in Alabama at the time, and they had these little like mini bikes that were chain driven. You guys know what those things are? I know it's a silly question. I don't know because it's only my only exposure, and because I hated them, my son never was exposed to anything like that, except that when he went to Camp Orchard Hill. And so the chain, my sister was on it without a helmet. The chain came off, and her face went scraping across the highway. I'm still traumatized by that. And we were little kids, and I thought, I will never ride a motorcycle or anything with 2 wheels ever again, or at least without that has a motor on it. But even things like not even our direct trauma, it's trauma that we've witnessed of others can be very traumatizing and have a lifelong impact on us. So I know you can imagine I never dated a guy with a motorcycle, right? So, and then things also that were not considered in the ACEs report were homelessness. Can you imagine how traumatizing that is? And yet it wasn't even in the study. So now, and then job insecurity or instability, losing your job. I've lost a lot of jobs due to being moved or being fired or whatever the thing is. I mean, when my son Lucas was in and out of the hospital, they kind of didn't like that. They needed somebody to show up every day, so they fired me. What was I going to do? I had to make a choice, you know? So that was traumatizing, and it was very hard on our budget. So there's all these other things that could contribute to our ACEs score that weren't even taken into effect is the point of that. And the point of that is when we're looking at these families that are in the gap and the decisions that they make and how sometimes they end up there, or the challenge that are facing them to get them out of this gap, are rooted in trauma. So the third challenge is social and emotional well-being, and the lack of well-being, if we will. And this old, outdated belief that time heals all wounds, but it doesn't. It conceals. We see that now in all of the newest research on neuroscience and epigenetics and the research that's been done on trauma. So the impact of emotional stress on us is both emotional and physical. If you haven't read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, is so fascinating how every negative experience that we have attaches and it holds within our body. And it manifests as when we're not able to process out the trauma. It manifests as a physical or a mental or an emotional consequence, such as anxiety, depression, bipolar, ADHD, chronic fatigue, hypertension, insulin resistance, on and on. Mostly because people who have unprocessed trauma are in a state of stress all the time. When your body is in a defense mode all the time, you have these hormones that negatively impact your body and will make you inflamed and sick over time and cause these chemical imbalances, on top of feeling lonely, isolated, and hopeless. So what's the solution? Well, I think we all just need a little R&R. Give us a little time to think about it, but truthfully, it's not rest and relaxation, which is fantastic, but we need to get to work, not be resting with these kinds of issues. So the 2 solutions that I propose are resilience and resources. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. You know, there's this belief that resilience is the ability to bounce back quickly. I mean, that's fine. But hey, how about if we just develop resilience as a matter of prevention so that you don't have to bounce back? Because if you're bouncing back from something, that means you went through something that was difficult on you and was a hardship. And if we learn how to build resilience, not only in ourselves as, care workers, right, which put the oxygen mask on ourselves first, but certainly those who we serve, they will fare better over time. So how do we build resistance? No, we've got plenty of that. Resilience. Mindset, spiritual growth, healing emotional pain and trauma, managing and eliminating the stressors, and a community or a village of support, as we talked about this morning, right? How important that is, that we're all collaborating and working for the common good together. So what are the resources? I'm going to be honest, I'm just going to always give you an answer, but I seriously don't know what all of the resources are. But I know that there's a lot of resources in this room, and that we need resources to provide financial support for these families who are in the gap, and that we need to provide what they need for the emotional healing and support, and the social support, and sustainable salaries. Kanan said to me recently, money can make you happy, and I'm like, here's me, right? No, very philosophical. No, happiness is within you. You can be happy anytime. All right, seriously, people, I just want him to believe that, to stop talking about the negative stuff, right? But how many of you are happier when you can pay all of your bills and have extra money, right? Money can buy us some darn happiness, let's be honest. And if you're not sure about that, it's because you have never been dead broke, okay? So, and then I think it would be super helpful if we could broaden the guidelines on these assistance programs so that we can get people out of the gap, so they can start building their life to be more sustainable. Expanded child care resources. I forget who I told this morning, but I said last year when we did the Adopt a Single Mom for Christmas project, we have these moms, share their stories with us, and I had a mom tell me, I quit my job because I couldn't afford child care, so it was easier to sit home on welfare. It's real. It's a problem. We have moms, dads, whoever, people, singles in this community who want to work but can't afford to. Do you know what I mean? Every day. Who said that?
We hear that every day.
Yes.
If they lose everything, if they lose
Yes.
There's no transition.
There's no transition, just like you saw on that slide. So you're like, yep, see it. And then, of course, collaboration of community and resources. So on behalf of the Adopt a Single Mom Project, we need you, your community partnership, your collaboration, your sponsorship. So if you would like to partner with us or we can support you in any way, of course. I'm sure many of you have single moms that we could support socially and emotionally as we continue now, and as we continue to expand our programming. Believe me, the more the better. These ladies love getting together for our monthly Moms Night Out just to be women and talk about whatever. Not the difficulties, not all the past, but just moving forward. These single moms are very forward focused and thinking about their futures, not dwelling in where they're at. And that's what we need to keep creating, those environments for them. So as we heard this morning, and as I encourage now, it does take a village. But there are no villages, right? We all pretty much live as an island. I mean, we don't want to admit that. I mean, we are all in this room together right now, right? But we pretty much live our lives just going about, not really noticing much or collaborating with others, unless you're meeting in church. And I know how that is. You go in, you sit down, you hug everybody, and you go. So I want to leave you with, I'll say it's a poem, but it's a dedication to mothers. Village life fostered a sense of safety, exclusivity, purpose, acceptance, and importance. And these elements, these essential elements of thriving were built in. It was easier when we had the village. It was easier when we were all close and connected to our family. We have I'm speaking about my son and I. We are our family. We have no family, our closest family that we communicate with in any small way is like 900 miles away. Most of us have a very small circle of friends. Most of us don't trust anybody. That's why we have a very small circle of friends. So, this next slide will give you an image of what it's like for single parents carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. That really hit me when I saw that one of our single moms shared that on her page. And I was like, I'm stealing that. So let me share with you, you can stay on there, we're going to just keep that slide there while I read this to you. And it is a dedication to mothers. So you single dads, you just switch it up. Dear mothers, I'm sharing this with you today because I can no longer contain the ache in my gut and the fire in my heart over the injustice that you and I are bearing the brunt of. Though this injustice is affecting everyone, mothers not only feel its burden more, but we also feel disproportionately responsible for alleviating its pervasive and deep damaging symptoms, which is adding hugely to the weight of the world we're already carrying. It takes a village, but there are no villages. I'm referring to communities within which individuals know one another well, share the joys, burdens, and sorrows of everyday life, nurture one another in times of need, mind of well-being of each other's ever-roaming children and increasingly dependent elderly, and feel fed by their clearly essential contribution to the group that securely holds them. I'm talking about the way of life we all biologically are wired for, but that is nearly impossible to find in today's developed nations. I'm talking about the primary unmet need driving the frustration that most every villageless mother is feeling. The impact of our villageless realities is anything but insignificant. It's wreaking havoc on our quality of life in countless ways. In the absence of the village, enormous pressure is put on parents as we try to make up for what entire communities used to provide. Our priorities become distorted and unclear as we attempt to meet so many conflicting needs at once. We feel less safe and more anxious without known boundaries, expectations, and support of a well-known group of people with whom to grow. We're forced to create our tribes during seasons of our life when we have the least amount of time and energy to do so. We tend to hold to our ideals and parenting paradigms, even when doing so divides us, in an attempt to feel safer and less overwhelmed by doing so many ways and options. Our children's natural way of being is compromised, as most neighborhoods and communities no longer contain packs of roaming children with whom they can explore, create, and nurture their curiosity. We run around like crazy trying to make up for the interaction, stimulation, and learning opportunities that were once within walking distance. We forget what normal looks like and feels like, which leaves us feeling as if we're not good enough or enough for the right things. Depression and anxiety skyrocket, particularly during seasons of our lives when we instinctively know we need more support than ever, but don't have the energy to find it. We feel disempowered by the many responsibilities and pressure we're trying so hard to keep up with. We spend money we don't have on things we don't need in an attempt to fill the voids we feel. We rely heavily on social media for a sense of connection, which often leads us to feel even more isolated and inadequate. We feel lonely and unseen even when we're surrounded by people. Our partnerships are heavily burdened by the needs that used to be spread among communities, and our expectations of loved ones increase to unrealistic levels. We feel frequently judged and misunderstood. We feel guilty for just about everything, not wanting or having time to be our children's primary playmates, not working enough, working too much, allowing too much screen time in order to keep up with our million perceived responsibilities. Joy, lightness, and fun feel hard to access. We think we're supposed to be independent and yet feel ashamed for our need of others. We make decisions that don't reflect our values but are deeply unmet needs. Perhaps most tragically of all, the absence of the village is distorting many mothers' sense of self. It's causing us to feel that our inadequacies are to blame for our struggles, which further perpetuates the feeling that we must do even more to make up for them. It's a trap, a self-perpetuating cycle, a distorted reality that derives its strength from the oppressive mindsets still in place despite our freedoms. In the absence of the village, we're disadvantaged like never before. We may have more freedoms than our foremothers, but our burden remains disproportionately, oppressively heavy. Since the beginning of time and until recently, mothers have borne life's burdens together. We tended one another's wounds, both physical and emotional, relied on one another for strength when times were tough, and sought counsel from communities' wise, experienced, and cherished elders. Village life fostered that sense of safety, inclusivity, purpose, acceptance, and importance. These essential elements of thriving were built in. Today, we're being forced to create all of that for ourselves within a society that has physically and energetically restructured itself around a whole new set of priorities. It's a profits before people model that threatens the well-being of nearly everything we mothers are wired to protect. We can buy into it, we can make peace with it, and conform to the ways things are, or we can exercise our freedoms and commit to doing our unique essential part in creating change, starting within us and working our way out. That is what I'm optimistic and hopeful for. Thank you. So what is next? So I know that the thinkers, the creators, and the doers of this community are all on the same page. And that is that we want to elevate our people with an intention and vision to elevate this community. But it starts with the individual. Just like was said this morning, it starts with one, helping one person to one person to a family to another family, whatever that looks like. So it's our intention with the Adopt a Single Mom Project to continue to create opportunities for working single moms to learn, to be inspired, to be supported so they can elevate their lifestyle, elevate their mindset, elevate their love of self, and be able to curate a life they feel good about, thriving as moms and women in our community.